Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to talk about part 3 of The Triumph of Sutekh, which is volume 2 in the new adventures of Bernice Summerfield, one of the Doctor Who audio companions, and Lisa does a great job with Bernice, I must say. The Eye of Horus is interesting. All 3 of the stories so far, of course this is a four-part series, feel very distinct from each other. It's almost a little janky at times, going from part 1, which has one tone and feel to it, to part 2, which feels totally different, to part 3, which also feels totally different. It's a little janky going between them, especially since I'm not listening to them all back to back. There's definitely gaps between when I listen to them. It's a little weird going from one to the other, even though they lead from one end to the other. The guest cast is putting in a great performance. I am very much enjoying them. Lisa is great. Sylvester's great. Sophie is great. We don't get a lot of Sophie in part 3, but she's been great in the story so far. And of course, Gabriel Wolf as Sutekh. I'm very pleased to have him back in part 3. He wasn't in part 2. He was in part 1, but not part 2. But he's back, of course, voicing Sutekh here. And I very much enjoy that. I love Gabriel Wolf voicing Sutekh. He's just got such a cool voice. The woman voicing the Pharaoh, because it's a woman Pharaoh, a woman king, which is, a woman king is always a weird thing to hear from me. I just think that's a queen, but she's doing a good job. She sounds a little like Lisa, though, so sometimes I get confused whether the female Pharaoh is talking or Bernice is talking sometimes, because they sound very similar. And then the actor voicing her son, the prince, is also very good. And we have with this story, it kind of parallels Star Wars with me, kind of Revenge of the Sith, with the son turning on the mom because of the influence of Sutekh. It's kind of weird Sutekh has a body now, but apparently at some point he acquired an old body. That's not in the best of shape, but he acquired one. And he's manipulating the prince for his own ends. Much kind of like Emperor Palpatine manipulates Anakin and turns Anakin to the dark side. Sutekh manages to manipulate the prince to turn and overthrow his pharaoh mother, because it's unusual for a woman to be a pharaoh anyway, so he's able to turn the masses against her pretty quick. It's really weird how it starts out when they're on a flying ship that can go to other planets, even though we're in ancient Egypt. But you find out the head architect is the 7th Doctor, who is, of course, still alive. It doesn't do a very good job of explaining of how the 7th Doctor, was where he was in part 1, when he was kind of possessed by Sutekh. He managed to free himself, but he died and crumbled to dust. Whereas we don't really see him in part 2 until the very end. And then in part 3... he's kind of the architect to this pharaoh, and he doesn't recognize Bernie. He doesn't remember. All of his memories aren't there. You end up finding out at the end that part of his brain he had stored away somewhere else, so he doesn't have all of his memories because he's so busy working on this project. He's building this obelisk, which should be powered by the Eye of Horus, which can stop Sutekh, which ends up going wrong because once Sutekh gets power, he ends up using the Eye of Sutekh, which is apparently a thing, in the obelisk instead, which kind of gives him this ultimate power. It was a nice story. I kept getting distracted while listening to part 3 a bit. Part of that was just due to my own fatigue. I'd had a busy week. I actually ended up listening to most of the story yesterday, and I ended up taking a nap. And I knew I was kind of drifting off, so I paused the story. And then I listened to the last little bit of it this morning. So part of it might have been me. I enjoyed the story, but again, it just feels janky compared to parts 1 and 2 because they're so tonally different from each other. And Gabriel Wolf, again, is putting in a really good performance. The turn of the prince is a little too quick, kind of like Anakin Skywalker. It really parallels Revenge of the Sith a lot for me, which Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie. And some of the stuff with Bernie, I'm kind of like, wait, did she do... There were some parts here, maybe it's because I'm not listening to these just all in a row, where I was kind of like... The cliffhanger was good, though. The ending to part 3, with Sutekh basically gaining control. The Doctor, the female Pharaoh, you thought she had gotten killed, but she survived. She's there. And then she managed to escape. And of course, Bernice escaped. And then Ace shows up. Ace hasn't been in much of part 3, really. She's only kind of there at the end, being separated from Bernice at the end of part 2. She shows up with the TARDIS. And then, of course, Sutekh's kind of ending where he did in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, right where he wants to be. He's got control. You know, you get Sutekh doing his line of, you know, where I tread, I leave nothing but darkness, and I find that good. And, of course, I'm sitting there going... And then, of course, at the very end, you know, he does his I bring Sutekh's gift of death, which is a great cliffhanger. So it's very much kind of like at the end of Ruby Sunday, where our heroes are on the rope. Sutekh looks like he's reigned supreme. It is called the Triumph of Sutekh. And, you know, we're going to have to see how the 7th Doctor fixes everything in part 4 with Bernice and Ace and the Pharaoh. It was good. Definitely, it's not as good as the Pyramids of Mars, but that's a very high bar. I mean, the Pyramids of Mars is probably one of the top 10 greatest Doctor Who stories of all time. It's just phenomenal. It's a high bar even for the 4th Doctor era. So certainly a high bar for Doctor Who in general. So it's very hard to try to reach Pyramids of Mars. I am enjoying it more than I did Empire of Death, considerably, as Empire of Death was just kind of a huge disappointment. Deflated. I like the way one of my subscribers described watching Empire of Death. It left them deflated. That's a good way to put it. I actually like that word. It sums it up perfectly. This is a much better alternative to Empire of Death and Legend of Ruby Sunday thus far. I'm enjoying the cast. I'm enjoying the story, even if it's, like I said, parts 1, 2, and 3 feel so different. And I wonder if part 4 is going to do like that, where it just feels so different. Kind of like, I can't really think of anything to compare it to. I liked The Eye of Horus. It was a fun listen, but sometimes you just don't quite know the words. It was a good listen, but again, it's just coming off parts 1 and 2 being so different. But the voice cast was good. And I liked Sutekh being able to control these golden scarabs when he makes the prince basically sacrifice his best friend to, you know, I guess prove he was willing to follow Sutekh. And it's interesting to see the Egyptian crowd turn on the woman Pharaoh so easily and how they start calling out Sutekh's name. That was really interesting to see how fast people can turn against you. That's always fascinating to me. So yes, The Eye of Horus. I enjoyed it. I want to know if you've listened to it. So comment down below and let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that and get early access to videos and exclusive videos. Check that out. I want to give a shout out to a couple of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney and Sam Venning. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons and YouTube members. It's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box down there. If there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review, this was actually sent to me by Robert. I appreciate Robert sending this. He sent this to the P.O. box. So I appreciate that, as I think he knew I wanted a nice alternative for the return of Sutekh over what we got in the Shooty-Gatwa Season 1. And this is a much better alternative so far. So I appreciate Robert sending that. So if there's anything you'd like to send me, the P.O. box is down there. Links to the Amazon wish list are down there. Links to the Amazon UK wish list are also down there as well. Most importantly, thank you for watching.